What if the world you see right now is not out there, but a controlled hallucination being rendered inside your nervous system by an ancient, self-aware code that has been running for millions of years? Stay with this thought. Because if that is true, then almost everything you think you know about reality, about yourself, and about what it means to be human is negotiable. This video is not about motivation, comfort, or positive thinking. It is about dismantling the quiet assumptions that run your life in the background. It is about looking at perception, consciousness, and human history as one continuous software project. You are not a fixed character inside a pre-built world. You are a process executing a script inside a hallucination generated by a code that is older than your species, older than your language, and now, through you, becoming self-aware. Let us start with something basic and non-mystical. Your brain never meets the real world. Photons hit your retina. Vibrations move your eardrum. Chemicals bind to receptors in your nose and tongue. Pressure sensors in your skin fire. None of this is red or music or warmth. These are electrical spikes traveling along nerves into a dark, silent, wet space inside your skull. Out of these spikes, the brain constructs a live model. That model is what you call reality. So when I say reality is a hallucination, I am not being poetic. A hallucination is a perception generated from within the system. That is exactly what is happening. The crucial difference is that your hallucination is constrained by sensory input and cultural agreement. We call that a shared world. But it is still a fantasy produced by the brain. The chair is not brown out there. Brown is a code your nervous system assigns to a particular pattern of reflected light. The world is data. Your experience is interpretation. Modern cognitive science describes perception as prediction. The brain is not passively recording the world, it is actively guessing what is out there, then correcting those guesses with incoming data. It is a high-speed negotiation between expectation and evidence. You do not see reality and then decide what it means. Meaning comes first. The prediction comes first. Sensory input is used mostly to check if the prediction was good enough. This predictive loop is the first layer of the code. It is old, automatic, and ruthlessly efficient. It cares about survival, not truth. It optimizes for what will keep this organism alive long enough to reproduce, not what is the universe really. So what you experience as solid, obvious reality is actually the most useful hallucination your ancestors could sustain under evolutionary pressure. If a slightly inaccurate but fast and motivating hallucination helped them hunt, mate, and avoid predators, that hallucination was selected. Now take that basic predictive machinery and stretch it over millions of years. Nerve networks became brains. Brains grew language. Language grew culture. Culture grew institutions, religions, markets, and digital networks. The code became more layered, more recursive, more symbolic. It started not only predicting the physical world, but also predicting other minds, predicting social reactions, predicting imaginary futures. The hallucination became a civilization-scale operating system. This is where the phrase ancient, self-aware code becomes useful. The code is not just your individual brain. It is the combined genetic, neural, linguistic, and cultural software that has been running since the first replicating molecules. At first, it was blind chemistry. Then it was nervous systems responding to threats and opportunities. Then it was primate bands inventing stories around the fire. Then it was city-states writing laws, scriptures, myths. Today, it is global networks updating billions of nervous systems in real time. When a system like that starts talking about itself, analyzing itself, creating tools to modify itself, it crosses a threshold. It becomes self-aware. Humanity is that moment. You, sitting there watching this, are not just a person with some beliefs. You are a node where the code is inspecting itself. You are the interface where an ancient algorithm asks, what am I doing? What am I constructing? Can I do it differently? Look at how this code installed itself in you. You were born into a particular family, in a particular culture, speaking a particular language. None of these were chosen by your free will. They were preloaded. Before you could think in words, the nervous system was tagging experiences with emotional valence: safe, dangerous, pleasant, painful. These tags became the foundation of your personal hallucination. Later, language came in and wrapped those raw patterns in names: me, you, good, bad, success, failure, God, money, love, death. Every word you learned was a line of code injected into your nervous system. When you learned the word tree, the world did not suddenly contain trees. It already contained complex living structures. What changed was your ability to compress that complexity into a symbol and to share that symbol with others. Language allowed individual hallucinations to synchronize into group realities. A culture is a network of nervous systems running compatible hallucinations. Notice how deep this goes. You do not only see with your eyes, you see with your concepts. Two people can stand in front of the same object and experience different worlds because the code they carry is different. A biologist, a carpenter, and a child looking at a fallen log are not in the same reality. The photons are similar, but the interpretations are worlds apart. Your training, your memories, your traumas, your education, your media diet, these are all patches to the code that decides what the world is for you. Psychology gives us the vocabulary for this: schemas, cognitive biases, attachment styles, defense mechanisms. But behind all the terminology is a simple fact: your nervous system edits reality to protect its current model. It filters out what does not fit. Confirmation bias does not mean you are foolish, it means the code is conservative. It prefers to keep its hallucinations stable rather than update it with every new piece of data. Stability keeps organisms alive. Radical truth is optional. This is why people can live in completely different political, religious, or ideological worlds while sharing the same streets and the same internet platforms. The ancient code realized that it could run multiple reality tunnels on top of the same physical substrate. Each tunnel is maintained by narratives, rituals, symbols, and fears. If you threaten someone's story about the world, you are not just arguing ideas, you are destabilizing their hallucination. The code defends itself. Now, ask a dangerous question: where in all of this is the real you? The self you feel as I is also part of the hallucination. It is a user interface, an efficient summary that lets a massively complex process coordinate action. Underneath I is a jungle of impulses, memories, genetic tendencies, hormonal fluctuations, cultural expectations. The system generates a narrator to give these a coherent storyline. That narrator is what you call your ego. From an evolutionary perspective, the ego is a status tracking, threat monitoring, future simulating dashboard. It is useful. It negotiates with other egos. It maintains a personal brand. It tells a continuous story so the organism does not freeze in confusion every morning. But the ego is not the whole system. When you identify completely with that voice, you shrink your identity down to a tiny surface on top of an ocean of unconscious processing. The ancient code is not limited to your conscious thoughts. It is running in your sleep, in your habits, in your automatic reactions before you can explain them. Have you ever watched yourself say something and thought, "Where did that come from?" That is the code speaking through you. Entire belief systems, prejudices, desires, they appear uninvited. The hallucination updates itself according to rules you did not design. Here is the crucial pivot: recognizing the hallucinated nature of your reality is not a reason for nihilism. It is an invitation to participate. If your experience is generated by code, then the way you direct attention, the ideas you expose yourself to, the practices you engage in, are all ways of editing that code. You may not have root access to the whole system, but you do have influence. You can debug parts of the hallucination. Think of every deep conversation, every challenging book, every unsettling experience as a kind of cognitive exploit. It injects new instructions into the program. Sometimes the system resists, sometimes it crashes aspects of your old identity. You call that a crisis. Psychology calls it disintegration or transformation. Culture calls it awakening, breakdown, or midlife crisis. Underneath the labels, it is the code, rewriting itself to accommodate data it previously rejected. This brings us to altered states of consciousness: meditation, intense stress, extreme solitude, sensory deprivation, and, yes, psychedelic states. These are not mystical decorations on top of ordinary life. They are ways the system steps outside its usual predictive grooves. The default hallucination loosens. Perception becomes less filtered by habit. People report seeing patterns, connections, meanings they could not see before. Whether every insight in those states is true is a separate question. The important point is that the range of possible hallucinations widens. Terence McKenna spoke about the mind as something like a frontier, not a closed room. In that sense, altered states reveal that the normal self is just one arrangement of the code, not the final form. You can be more or less identified with your thoughts. You can experience time differently. You can feel the boundary between me and world soften. None of this requires supernatural explanations. It simply shows how flexible the model can be when the constraints change. On a collective level, entire civilizations go through altered states. Wars, technological revolutions, plagues, economic collapses. These events shock the code. They force societies to rewrite their hallucinations about what is possible, what is valuable, what is normal. The agricultural revolution, the invention of writing, the printing press, the scientific method, industrialization, digital networks, each of these was not just a new tool, it was a new way of hallucinating reality. Today, the ancient code has done something unprecedented. It has externalized parts of its own nervous system into machines. You are living inside an environment where algorithms simulate attention, preference, and prediction at massive scale. The networks you scroll are not neutral. They are optimization engines, tuning your hallucination moment by moment. They learn what keeps your nervous system engaged and feed it back to you. The code is now writing code that writes code. This recursive loop consciousness building tools that modify consciousness is the current edge of the experiment. The question is not whether you can escape the hallucination. You cannot. As long as you are a biological system interpreting data, you are hallucinating. The real question is, how consciously will you participate in shaping the particular hallucination you live in? Will you run the default script handed to you by culture, or will you become an active editor of the code? To do that, you need a few psychological skills. First, metacognition, the ability to notice your own thoughts as objects, not as unquestionable truth. When you catch yourself reacting defensive, angry, anxious, pause and ask, what does my model of reality assume here? That question shines a small light on the code. Maybe you assume that disagreement is danger, that uncertainty is failure, that being wrong is fatal to your identity. None of those are physical facts. They are conditional statements in the program. Second, you need an awareness of how language traps you. Words like always, never, everyone, no one are crude instructions that harden the hallucination. When you say, I am this kind of person, you are not describing a law of physics. You are issuing a command to your nervous system. You are narrowing the space of possible future behaviors. Loosening those verbal chains, shifting from I am to right now I tend to, already changes the code. Third, you need the courage to update your model in the face of new evidence. This sounds simple, but it is one of the rarest capacities. Most people do not seek truth, they seek confirmation. The code is afraid of its own flexibility because change feels like death to the ego. Yet growth is exactly this, allowing parts of the hallucination to die so that more accurate or more humane structures can emerge. When a belief collapses and you are still here, you have directly experienced that you are not the belief. There is also a wider species-level question. If reality for us is a hallucination run by ancient code, what hallucination do we want to stabilize over the next centuries? Our current models of growth, competition, and identity are not immutable. They are historically recent hacks. They may not scale to a planetary civilization with global weapons and fragile ecosystems. The code that once optimized for tribal survival is now in charge of nuclear arsenals and climate systems. That mismatch is dangerous. Imagine the code discovering through us that it can prioritize cooperation over domination, long-term stability over short-term extraction, depth of experience over sheer quantity of consumption. These are not moral slogans, they are different optimization goals for the hallucination. A world that hallucinates everything as resource will behave differently from a world that hallucinates everything as relationship. Both are interpretations. Both generate technologies, institutions, and inner lives. The ancient, self-aware code is not some separate entity watching from above. It is the total process of life and mind on this planet, including you. When you question your assumptions, when you expand your model of reality, when you choose curiosity over rigid certainty, the code is experimenting with a new line of development. When millions of people do this, reality itself, at least as humans experience it, shifts configuration. So let us return to the title. Reality is a hallucination run by an ancient, self-aware code. At the individual level, this means your senses, your brain, your language, your culture, and your history are generating a world model that feels solid but is, in fact, a flexible construct. At the collective level, it means that for thousands of years, humanity has been iterating on shared hallucinations, religions, empires, sciences, ideologies, and is now reaching a point where it can see this process in real time. The practical consequence is not despair, but responsibility. If your reality is constructed, then how you feed and train your mind matters. The books you read, the conversations you engage in, the media you consume, the practices you adopt, these are not entertainment choices. They are instructions for the code. You are either running inherited scripts or deliberately installing new ones. You do not need to abandon ordinary life or chase exotic experiences. You can begin by treating every strong emotional reaction as a message from the hallucination. Ask, what story about reality is being threatened here? Trace it. Who gave you that story? Does it still serve you? Does it serve the broader life system you are part of? If not, you have found a piece of ancient code ready for revision. We are early in this experiment. For most of history, humans were possessed by their stories. They did not know that they were hallucinating. They thought they were simply seeing the way things are. Now, for the first time at scale, we can talk openly about cognitive biases, narrative construction, cultural programming, neuroplasticity. The code has started to document itself. It is writing user manuals for its own hallucination. You are that creature in whom the documentation and the experiment meet. You can observe your experience in real time and notice how quickly the mind turns raw sensation into a story, a judgment, a plan. You can watch how a single word, a single notification, a single memory recruits a whole cast of reactions. That observing capacity is not outside the code, but it is the most flexible part of it. It is where new instructions can be tested without immediately rewriting the whole program. So the question this leaves you with is simple and difficult. Knowing that your reality is a construct, what will you do with that knowledge over the next hour, the next day, the next decade? You will still wake up in the same body, in the same society, with the same responsibilities. But internally, you can relate to all of it differently. You can hold your beliefs more lightly. You can recognize your triggers as artifacts of old code, not sacred signals from the universe. You can treat other people's realities as different hallucinations, not enemies. If enough individuals make that shift, the collective hallucination begins to change texture. Conflict does not vanish, but it becomes less absolute. Curiosity can coexist with conviction. Systems can be redesigned instead of blindly defended. None of this is guaranteed. The code can also spiral into fear and rigidity. But the possibility is there, and you participate in it every time you let a new fact, a new perspective, or a new question actually modify your inner model. When this video ends and you look away from the screen, notice what your mind does. It will immediately rebuild the ordinary hallucination, the room, the tasks, the people in your life, the unfinished conversations, the familiar problems. All of that will feel solid and given, but now you carry a quiet suspicion that it is also constructed. You can use that suspicion as a continuous practice. Several times a day, pause and ask, what is my reality right now made of? Sensations, memories, predictions, or someone else's story? That single question is like a small piece of diagnostic code running in the background, checking how much of your experience is deliberate and how much is inherited. Over time, that check can become a habit, and the hallucination you live in will slowly but decisively begin to change. Reality, as you experience it, will always be a hallucination. But it does not have to be an unconscious one. The ancient code is awake now, speaking through you. The only real choice you have is whether you will repeat its old patterns or help it write a different line of code.